The Chargers have officially hired Ravens Director of Player Personnel Joe Hortiz to be their next general manager, and it is a match made in heaven with new head coach Jim Harbaugh.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons together, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys and all the everydayers for making us your first listen today, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, after a large part of the reason why Jim Harbaugh left the 49ers and the NFL the first time was because of disagreements with the general manager, it was of paramount importance that the Chargers got this hire right and paired Jim Harbaugh with the right general manager and have the right partner to leave this Chargers organization into the future. And then a part of that culture change, a big part of that, is going to be the new Chargers strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert. And this guy is an animal, and you're going to love everything you hear about what he brings to the table.
Yeah, we have some great Ben Herbert stories to get to. You are all going to want to run through a wall for that man. And we're also going to get into some different options for a Chargers offensive coordinator, not named Greg Roman, and an offensive line coach, because we know how important that is. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, the Chargers have now officially hired Joe Hortiz to be their general manager, one of 2 GMs that got a second interview with the Chargers, and someone that we knew had an extensive relationship with not only John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh's brother, but also Jim, and as far as how they develop players and what kind of players the Ravens were looking for over the years. But to me, this is a perfect fit, right? Someone who's not going to be afraid to let Jim Harbaugh have the personnel power that he wants, but someone that's going to help him make the most guided decisions in when he's doing that, right? To me, knowing they have a good relationship, knowing that this is someone that is handpicked by Jim Harbaugh, right? Knowing exactly what type of players that Jim Harbaugh likes, because that's the really important thing. The Ravens and Michigan both value the same type of players over the last couple of years. So having 16 seasons with his brother, knowing exactly what you're getting, and Joe Hortiz, I absolutely love this because he's also one of the best scouts in the NFL as well.
Yeah, I mean, learning from your mistakes or you'll be doomed to repeat them. And this is why it is very important that you get somebody that has a pre-existing relationship with Jim Harbaugh. You want this to go right. You want to make sure that the GM pairing with the head coach is not going to be something that gets in the way or hinders, the progress of this organization going forward. You want them to be on the same page, reading from the same sheet of music, so they can go out there and orchestrate this illustrious comeback that we all want to see and that we expect to see to the Chargers back to winning. And Joe Hortiz is, one of the best, evaluators out in the game, according to John Spanos. This is a guy who is one of the most respected player evaluators and personnel minds in the league, whose contributions to the Ravens front office over the past 2 years cannot be overstated. So pairing, somebody who has a good relationship with Jim Harbaugh with somebody who has an extensive background in really constructing really good organizations and really good football teams, I think that is the perfect marriage for sure.
Yeah, and I think the thing is like the one difference with Joe Hortiz as far as a lot of the guys they interviewed was he wasn't an assistant GM, right? He's a director of player personnel. So that means pro and college level, he's the guy that's going to be bringing in free agents and, drafting players, all of those things, and giving the powers that be in the GMs all of the information they need to do that, right? But I think he goes into a great situation with the Chargers because we know Ed McGuire, who is a salary cap wizard, even though the Chargers are in a bad salary cap spot. I think that was more of a desperation move last year of the coaching staff and the front office trying to go all in to save their jobs. I think it was more of that, but having someone as experienced as Ed McGuire to handle the financial part of it, and also having someone in Jim Harbaugh who is a organization builder, right? Yeah. Jim Harbaugh knows how to run a program because that's what he did in Michigan. He wasn't just the head coach, right? He was the head coach, the lead recruiter, basically their general manager as well, the CEO, exactly. So if you have the program builder and you have a guy who's great with the financials, that lets Joe Hortiz do what he does best, because this is not someone that is brought in just because of his relationship to Jim Harbaugh. It's someone who's brought in because the Ravens have had one of the absolute best rosters in the NFL for the past 2 decades. They've had a competitive team and have been a winning program. And I think that is the other thing here, David, is just Joe Hortiz is a master roster builder, and that's what you're trying to do. And the good relationship with Jim Harbaugh lets him help build the roster in Jim Harbaugh's image.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's crucial, and I think part of his kind of learning curve, or where he got that from, was learning under 2 phenomenal general managers with the Ravens. First with Ozzie Newsome, who is an NFL Hall of Famer, and now the current Ravens general manager, Eric DeCosta. And I mean, this is a guy who helped orchestrate 2 Super Bowl winning teams and 7 AFC North championships, which is ridiculous. That's the type of success that you want. That's the type of success that you're trying to bring to the Chargers organization on a year in and year out basis. This guy only knows winning. This is what the Ravens have done. They're a tough organization. They're a physical organization, but they're a very well-run organization, and they hit on draft picks in the beginning of the rounds, the middle rounds, and the late part of the rounds in the draft. So they do a fantastic job of scouting, and Joe Hortiz was a large part in orchestrating that setup with the Ravens.
He was. And I mean, just to go to your point, I mean, these are all guys who were drafted in the 3rd round or later. Mark Andrews, Justin Madubuike, Orlando Brown Jr., Brandon Stevens, Isaiah Likely, Ben Powers, Geno Stone. The list goes on and on. There's a ton of guys they've been able to find contributions from later on in the draft, and he's also done well. When you need a guy that's going to contribute this year, you bring in a Zay Flowers, right? In 2022, you bring in a Kyle Hamilton, who's now the best safety in the NFL, right? So, whether it's instant contributors or guys that are going to develop into something down the road, he has experience with all of that. And not only that, he knows what type of players Jim Harbaugh likes, because he helped John Harbaugh get players from Michigan and the Big Ten that he knew they would like. And they were happy with the guys they got, but from the scouting of Jim Harbaugh. And also, he helped build Mike McDonald, the defense in Baltimore that was the number 1 defense in the NFL last year. You don't get that without the roster as well, right? It's the coordinating, right? You need the roster too. He built that for Mike McDonald and has a relationship with Jesse Minter as well. So building Jesse Minter's defense is something that Joe Hortiz probably has a lot of experience, or does have a lot of experience in. So
definitely
hitting in the draft, finding some value in free agency, all things he's been able to do. And I think what you hope, David, is that with Jim Harbaugh and Joe Hortiz, that tandem can bring the Chargers back to having a consistently winning team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his statement, and it definitely is something that seems very familiar with what everyone else has been saying that has been hired by the Chargers. He said, the Chargers brand, the uniforms, foundational building blocks already on the roster, a new training facility, SoFi, and a clear commitment from the Spanos family to dedicating every resource possible towards bringing a Lombardi trophy home to our fans. It's all there. That's what you want. That is all we have been clamoring for. And, the Spanos family, for all of the things that anybody and everybody has said, some of it very warranted, some of it maybe not, they are putting their money where their mouths are. And that is clear in the decisions that they have made, bringing in Jim Harbaugh, Joe Hortiz, Ben Herbert, Jesse Minter. Those guys are not coming cheap. You know, they're getting paid a lot of money. And the Spanos family is bringing them in because I think they truly do understand that this is what it's going to take for the Chargers to win and win a championship.
I mean, this is a guy that was with the same organization for 26 years, right? And it's for him to leave that for the Chargers, I think shows you, and he said it. He said, when you've had the privilege of working with one organization your entire career, something that's exceedingly rare in our business, the opportunity and fit has to be pretty much perfect to consider a change. That's the Chargers, right? He wasn't going to leave for just any job. He has had chances for other jobs in the past. This was the right fit. This is the team he believes with Jim Harbaugh can get them the Lombardi trophy, as he's saying. So I love it. I love the fit here. And it's just weird, as a lot of people have pointed out, that it seems like the Chargers are getting everything right. I am willing to put myself out on a limb and say they made the absolute best hire they could have with their new strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert, not just because of his last name, but the dude's a psycho in all of the best ways, and I can't wait to get into him coming up right after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you're always going to find exactly what you're looking for, and the best part is, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Can we talk about Ben Herbert? David, this is something that I saw other people freaking out about, as far as like Michigan fans super scared that he was going to leave.
And
Jim
hating
Harbaugh.
it.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh going out there and saying like, hey, I've hired a lot of great coaches, which we've seen, and we're going to talk about some more later. He's the best one, right? That's what he says, right? And when you start digging a little bit deeper into Chargers' new strength and conditioning coach, Ben Herbert, you get it. David, this is a guy that, like I said, former defensive lineman with the Wisconsin Badgers back in the day, and to be a defensive lineman, you always kind of have to be a crazy person. Like, that just kind of comes with the job. The more I read about this guy, David, the more I like it. I absolutely love this hiring, and like you talked about earlier, right? If you're talking about changing your culture, this is a culture setter. This is someone who can come in and shock the system, man. Like, this guy feels like the whole package.
I mean, he absolutely does. And I think Jim Harbaugh honestly put it best. He said he is the X factor in our football program. He is the center of player development. He is phenomenal. More than anybody in our entire program, with every player, it's with every position group. His impact on every single player, every single coach, including myself, we say he is the best. That is a ringing endorsement from one of the best coaches in the game right now. So, yes, it's crucially important that you bring in somebody who is going to train these guys, not just mentally, not just physically, but understanding the new nutrition aspects of it, and really not being afraid to bring that old school mentality of really putting in the work and the more is more attitude. This is a guy that's going to try to bring that vision and that culture change to life. Ben Herbert is a very scary looking individual, but he is truly, just reading all the stories about him, one of the best in the game, period.
And one of the most expensive, right? One of only two strength and conditioning coaches that made at least $1 million. So another example of the Chargers putting their money where their mouth is and footing the bill for someone who feels like they're worth it. But going to your point, this dude, if you were talking about, training for the elements, he has a deck of cards thing he does with his players where, hey, if you get a king as he's handing out those decks of cards, guess what you have to do? Go jump in an ice bath, do an ice plunge a couple of times in your full workout gear, in your full practice gear, and go finish the rest of the practice while you're drenched in ice cold water, right? Talking about getting ready for bad elements, things like that. That's part of it, right? They also at Arkansas, right, because he did have 5 seasons with Arkansas, 11 seasons with Wisconsin before spending the last 6 years with Harbaugh and Michigan. They had the black room. And so every one of these athletes is competing, right, to get to the level where they're allowed to go into the black room, which was described as a torture chamber by Michael Cohen in a Fox Sports article, right? Where it's like players were competing with each other to be able to get into that room, to see what it's about, to show that they can actually work harder than everyone else. And that was one of the things I really appreciated, David, is he has a system. He has a point system for all the core performance indicators, things that are going to really show how much better you can get in your performance. And it goes from red to green, right? And he said, red is bad. I want them hell-bent on green. And it's keeping them against each other, right? Because the thing is, David, is like, if you want to be a physical team, you don't just flip a switch and Jim Harbaugh comes in and now you're a physical team. That's not how it works, right? No. You have to build it. And this is a guy that feels like he can build that, not only physically, mentally as well, but you have to get bigger and stronger first.
Yeah, I mean, he breeds it. I mean, that's what Ben Herbert does. And with competition, if you want to get better, if you want to change things, you have to do it every single day. And that's one of the things that was, very prevalent with anybody talking about Ben Herbert, is this guy is modeled and really rooted in consistency. Like, he's going to bring it every single day. He's going to be the same person every single day. But, when you want to get better. I think competition in everything that you do, and when you foster that type of environment, that's where you get real results. And I think that's why he does come up with those point systems. That's why he wants everyone to really know where they're at and compete.
And it's all publicly displayed too, right?
Yeah,
Everyone
everywhere.
can see it. Yeah,
exactly.
There's no hiding.
So everyone on the team knows where your score is and
Accountability.
where you want to be, and everyone is there trying to fight to get to where you eventually want to go. And that's the kind of things that he does to really try to change the culture, instill the culture, and cultivate that and grow it every single day. He's going to be instrumental in changing this Chargers football team from a little bit soft to a hardened, physical, tough football team that nobody wants to face.
Exactly. And there's no two ways about it. The Chargers were a finesse team, right? They have been considered soft, right? And I think it's fair with what we've seen, right? Being bad in the trenches, being bad against the run, right? Like all of those things that you think about when you think of physical teams. The Chargers weren't holding up their end of the bargain. And if you want to be a fourth quarter team, if you want to be a team that puts teams away, that starts in the weight room. That starts in the offseason. That starts in the program. And in his own words, paraphrasing here, it's like, when they stop, we keep going. That's the mentality there, right? But also, the nutrition's a huge part of it, right? And the Chargers, luckily now, should have in their new facilities much better, ways to prepare food for these players and give them the best nutrition that they need. But what he did, he actually had a visual representation of it, right? He had two plants that he brought into the office. One was named the governor. The other one's name was the deacon. The governor, he only gave good things, Miracle Grow, water, all of those things. But the deacon, he gave beer and whiskey and Doritos, right? And it was basically just a representation. It's like, hey, what you put into your body matters, because this plant is dead and dying and smells terrible over here. And this plant, when it's taking all the right things, is thriving and doing great. So it's like, another part of it too was just, he has a nice blend of, okay, I'm old school, but I'm also willing to lean into the science. So much so that he actually had like a medical device, basically a table to give players better like soft tissue prevention, right, from injuries there. He actually created like a workout table that these players can use and gotten a patent for.
And it got
like
patented.
He got patented after like 4 years. Like, that's going the extra mile. That is being the X factor. And I think what you hope, David, is between, someone like Ben Herbert, giving Ben Herbert these new facilities. I don't know if he takes the job, if it's at the Hogue Center, right? If they're renting out basically abandoned places. Like, I don't think he takes it.
Absolutely not. Why would he?
But having those two things, right, especially for an injured team, especially for a soft team, right, it's like with the facilities, with the coach, it feels like this is a huge step in injury prevention, right, and getting these players right.
Yeah, I think you made an excellent point when you said you probably don't get one without the other, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think also that was a big part of the allure for Jim Harbaugh as well. I mean, how could you not have that excitement level of being able to step into facilities that are literally state of the art, that are brand new, that are, and everything is there, anything and everything that you possibly could need to get that maximum output out of your players, out of your organization. Now you pair that facility with someone who has the track record of success to go out there and get the most out of those players. And I think that is going to be the perfect marriage. That's how you reduce injuries. That's how you maximize effort and maximize results. When you pair the good coaching with the good facilities, that is where you're going to get the maximum output.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that Ben Herbert's done. And the thing is like, you can't totally prevent injuries. Injuries are going to happen. We're not saying
part of the game,
right? Yeah. Like, you can have unlucky things too. Like, Corey Linsley missed a bunch of games, right? That wasn't due to injuries, right? But it kind of goes in that column when you're looking at it. But like, just in the last 2 seasons, right? Mike Williams, these all guys that missed at least 4 games. Mike Williams, both seasons. Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa twice. Rashawn Slater, Joshua Palmer, Derwin James, Justin Herbert, J.C. Jackson. I just named every single one of the Chargers' top paid players except for Khalil Mack. That's how injured the Chargers have been. All of those guys missed borderline a quarter of the season, right? So just helping that, right? Going in the right direction, giving yourself the best chance at it, because some of it's dumb luck.
And your controllables. This is what we were talking about in the past about really taking care of all of the controllables that are not confined within the salary cap. This is where you can win on the margins. This is how you do it right here.
And Ben Herbert, man, it also just like the ultimate inspiration, the ultimate motivator. Like, the way his players react, the way his players want to get better for him, like all of that stuff is just like you're getting all of that. So like we talked about all the different kind of quirky things he can do, probably fits right in with Jim Harbaugh, but like just the respect his players have for him, the admiration his players have for him, the fact that, he takes pictures of all of them the first day and they look like completely different people by the time they graduate. Like that's what Ben Herbert brings to the table. I can't wait for him to institute some of those things with the Chargers, man. I think it is a home run hire. This is someone Michigan desperately wanted to keep, and the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh found a way to sway him after a life in collegiate sports to make the jump to the NFL and do it with a bunch of grown men who honestly need it. But we have more to get into, including an option at offensive coordinator that's not named Greg Roman that I think we could get excited about. A lot of connections with a potential offensive coordinator, Tanner Engstrand. And we're also going to get into the offensive line coach because, David, I think we know better than anyone, offensive line coaching is important, and we saw it all come to fruition in 2023. So we're getting into that coming up right after this. First, though, I do need to tell you guys, happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win in Super Bowl 58, and right now they have the Chiefs as a 1.5-point underdog. I would love to see the 49ers win because I do not want to see it be the Chiefs. But I also love the prop bets, right? Which players will score a touchdown? How many points will be scored in the game? This is one I really like. Chris Jones and Nick Bosa each getting half a sack at plus 200. Seems like great odds there. George Kittle, anytime touchdown at plus 175. Another one, right? But new customers, if you join today, you'll also get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook of the NFL. David, it's time to get into a couple more coaching options as we see Jim Harbaugh start to fill out this staff. And let me tell you, it looks like a all-star staff, right? We're talking about, maybe getting that Chargers Avengers crossover show going. Like Jim Harbaugh is trying to bring the Avengers to Los Angeles, right? And it feels like all the guys they brought in so far, we've pretty much been behind 100%. That just doesn't happen. You don't get that kind of consensus. And the guys they're bringing in,
never
cream of the crop. And the Chargers are willing to pay for it. And this is just a totally new era for both of us who have been covering this team for 8 years and have been following them for most of our lives.
Yes.
And so I want to talk about who we could potentially see come to this staff because there's still a lot of openings that have to be filled. And I don't think a lot of the, coaches they have right now are going to be sticking around. So we're going to get into that. But I do want to tell everyone to make sure they're checking out the first ever sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, which is live on YouTube all day, every day, giving you local experts that only Locked On can provide because nobody knows their teams better than the local experts that are there covering them every single day. So make sure you guys check out and subscribe to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 sports streaming channel. David, we were talking about offensive coordinators, and I think the one name that everyone kind of freaks out about is Greg Roman. Not wanting Greg Roman, hand up. You can put me in that camp because I really don't want Greg Roman.
Yeah.
In that capacity, right? I think he can still bring value. But one of the names I've seen pop up, I think Stephen Hagland, I saw bring up this name early on in the process, was Tanner Engstrand, who is an interesting option for OC, David, because he is right now the Lions passing game coordinator. But if you look a little deeper, a dude who has a ton of ties with Jim Harbaugh and seems to make a lot of sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's the first place you got to look at when you're looking at offensive coordinator type of connections or any kind of coaching staff connections is you want to make sure and see that they've worked together in the past in some capacity. And in this situation, Engstrand has worked with him in a couple of different spots. University of San Diego and at Michigan as well as an offensive analyst. Right now he's the current passing game coordinator of the Lions, and a passing game coordinator basically is somebody who coordinates and organizes the passing game from concepts, personnel formations, based off pretty much any conceivable situation. So they're the guys that are trying to build those concepts and really try to deliver that to the offensive coordinator. So for those that are kind of wondering what that
definitely.
role
I think it's
was.
a good point.
So, that's definitely, something that, you're coming from one of the best offenses in the NFL this past year. Obviously, like we were talking about, Dan, Ben Johnson is the guy that orchestrated that. He's going to get all of the credit. But, this guy was part of building that, and building that success that, you were able to put Jared Goff in a lot of really, really good situations, and that offense took them all the way to the NFC Championship game.
And the reason we're talking about this guy today is because Ben Johnson on Tuesday ended up saying that he was going back to Detroit to stay their offensive coordinator, which there have been reports out, and I couldn't agree more. Didn't get a chance to work with Justin Herbert. Hey, I'm going to stick here for a little bit and wait for a better situation to open up. And I think he might have made the right call considering the options that are still available to him.
He did.
I think for him, though, for Ben Johnson to keep that role so the Lions cannot make Tanner Engstrand their offensive coordinator, which might have been the succession plan for him, right? I think that's huge for the Chargers, right? And I think the thing is like, Ben Johnson was like our second option. So it's like if you can get Jim Harbaugh and a piece of that, right, a key cog in that Lions offense has been lighting things up this year and match that with Justin Herbert, like, I might faint, like, for real.
I mean,
like,
get those open concepts that Jared Goff got, like, all year long.
Exactly. I mean, and someone who knows how to use his star players, too, and maximize the talent that he has and used rookies really well this year, too. But, like, San Diego native that likely grew up a Chargers fan, right? Actually played college football the same place I played college football at Grossmont College. Shout out the Griffins. And then San Diego State with the Aztecs. But then ended up going to be at USD where he was an offensive coordinator, ended up being Michigan analyst, and then went to the XFL and was an offensive coordinator there. And now he's the passing game coordinator for the Lions. But this is great, and he does have interest. I mean, he's already interviewed for one offensive coordinator position with the Patriots, has another one scheduled with Tampa Bay. So I think that shows you he's willing to potentially move on to and make that next step to an offensive coordinator. And I think one of the guys they compare him with that has some offensive coordinator experience, and most importantly, has a ton of offensive line coaching experience, is Tim Drevno. And David, this is a guy that has a ton of stints with Jim Harbaugh, and I think would be a great potential choice to help this Chargers offensive line reach its full potential, because there's going to be new guys on that line, but you need to get the most out of the guys you have too, and he feels like a guy that could do that.
Yeah, the offensive coordinator job is important, but the offensive line coach job, I think, is also extremely important because
like
a lot of these guys you have on the offensive line are under contract for multiple seasons. And, you know, with the cap constraints, I mean, yeah, you can bring some guys into the draft. You're going to need to. There's a couple positions that you're probably going to have to address, obviously center being, you know, chief among them. But you got to make sure that you get somebody that can really squeeze all the juice out of the orange here and really get the maximum output. And I don't think that anybody can sit here and say that offensive line last year played to their full potential. And I think
not at all.
Coaching is something that it really, you know, plays a part in that. And with Drevno, he was the offensive line coach for the 49ers when Jim Harbaugh was the coach there from 2011 to 2013. And he had a great record, obviously, because Jim Harbaugh had a great record. While he was there, he was 36-11-1, making him the most successful offensive line coach in San Francisco 49ers history. So this is a guy who definitely has experience, and he's been with Jim Harbaugh in multiple different spots, and it definitely makes a lot of sense.
4 times he has coached under Jim Harbaugh, so I wonder why we're making this connection, right? I mean, 3 seasons with Harbaugh at USD, all 4 seasons with Jim Harbaugh when he was at Stanford, 2 years as tight ends coach, 2 years as offensive line coach, 3 seasons as Harbaugh's offensive line coach in San Francisco, and then he was the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach for Michigan from 2015 to 2017. So this is about as deep as the ties can possibly run, right? 4 different stints. Why not make it 5, Tim? Come on down, because this is a guy that has 16 plus seasons of being a collegiate or pro offensive line coach. So he has the pedigree. He is a former offensive lineman himself. And I think especially when you have someone like that, if you're going to bring in a more inexperienced offensive coordinator in Tanner Engstrand, that is someone who can help bridge the gap and build a veteran staff around him of guys who do have that experience. Bring in Greg Roman if you want to be the run game coordinator and tight ends coach, right? Give him other guys who have done it before to help a young, bright mind be able to kind of live up to his potential without having to worry about all these other things and have the synchronicity that you're looking for. But I'll tell you guys what I told David right before the show. I don't think you can get a much more ringing endorsement than this. In 2012, with the 49ers, all 5 of their offensive linemen made the Pro Bowl. The starting offensive line in the Pro Bowl was the San Francisco 49ers starting 5.
Yeah, that's pretty damn good.
That's insane, man. Like that sounds like a joke, right? He's also worked with just a ton of guys who have done really well in the league, gotten a lot of guys drafted really high, like, you know, Elijah Vera Tucker, Austin Jackson has been, you know, offensive line coach for UCLA, USC for 2 different stints, as well as Michigan and all the other stops that he has. So a ton of experience, his guys play well when he's their offensive line coach, and I think that is another, great fit for a team that feels like all the pieces are kind of, coming together, and all the pieces fit. There's no piece so far, like even with Staley, right? There was a couple where it's like, okay, random defensive coordinator from Tennessee,
Right.
Derek Hansa with no connections, right? With Jim Harbaugh, everything fits so far, and the Chargers are willing to fit the bill. And this all-star staff is coming together, and it feels like there's a couple more guys who could fit in really nicely. And I know that, Tanner Engstrand's taking some other interviews. None of those other interviews have Justin Herbert. And if you have a chance to work with Justin Herbert and potentially go from a, OC to whatever,
strap yourself to that rocket.
Yeah, exactly. Do that. I mean, also, it hasn't been a rocket necessarily for the Chargers offense coordinators. I mean, I guess it was for Shane Steichen. Not so much for Joe Lombardi, even though he failed up and went to Denver and got that job there. So a lot to be excited about. I'm excited to see how this staff keeps coming together, and I'm excited to hear your guys' questions because tomorrow we're getting into a Chargers mailbag show, so make sure you hit us up at LockedOnLAC on Twitter. We'll put a questions post out. You can also hit us up in the YouTube comments on Instagram at LockedOnChargers or on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also slide into David Drogemeyer's DMs at DroTalkSD on Twitter, and you can find me at Dan Talk Sports. If you want to call in, you can also call your voicemail in. Leave a 30-second Chargers voicemail. It's likely to get on the show if you ask a question, ask a tier, right? But we will be getting into that tomorrow, so make sure you guys are back here for that, and don't miss it by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from. And then we have the press conference of all press conferences on Thursday, and we'll be back on Friday to talk about that. Maybe even go live on Thursday night. Who knows? Because we're pretty stoked about it. So make sure you guys are back here with us tomorrow, though, because it is your team every day. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.